Puerto Rico has a long road of recovery ahead, very long road. But we know that its people are proud and they are resilient and they will come back strong. And I've spent a lot of time with Governor Rossello, who is a terrific man, a terrific person, on Tuesday. And we will be there all the time to help Puerto Rico recover, restore, rebuild. We're working together very closely with your great governor and your congresswoman, who is terrific, Jessica. Terrific. We stand with them and with all of those who have suffered through natural disasters over these past several weeks, including those in Texas and Florida, and Louisiana got hit and got hit very hard. And the state of Alabama was incredible. They helped so many people coming up from Florida, and Georgia likewise. So many incredible people. And also we have to remember this, the Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands. Governor Mapp, who's become like a friend of mine, I spoke to him so much on the phone, the job he's done, they were hit so hard and not much was left. But they're rebuilding, and the spirit is incredible. U.S. Virgin Islands. We're also keeping in our hearts and prayers all of those affected by the disastrous earthquake in Mexico. In recent weeks, through extremely difficult times, we've seen Americans coming together from all races and all backgrounds to unite as one people under God. And I will tell you, we sent crews to Mexico, and the president was very gracious, called me yesterday and thanked me. We have some really talented people. They went there to help to solve that unbelievable, difficult problem that they have. That earthquake was devastating, and I appreciate the president of Mexico, and they were so kind in their response, but that was a tragic event. And our people did a fantastic job. So I want to thank all of our first responders and the people. Thank you. Thank you. And you have a wonderful president in Mexico, I can tell you that. When America is unified, there is no challenge we cannot overcome. When we empower the hopes of our people, especially these young, fantastic people right in front of me who perform so brilliantly. When we embrace the dignity and the beauty of human life, and then you just look out, there is no task too large and no dream beyond your reach. No dream. There's no dream beyond your reach. You know that, right? Talking to some very young people up front that you can't see. No matter who we are or where we come from, we are all Americans, and we are all bound together by our love for this country and for its flag and for each other. Great love. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. In that same spirit of unity, togetherness, and love, we are truly thrilled to have all of you right here at the White House. The White House, what a special place, right? You've read about the White House, you've heard. Who was at the White House before? You have some of the congressmen that were, right. Not too many. It's a very special place, but this is a celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, right? That's a big deal. That's a great thing. From our earliest days, Hispanic Americans have enriched our country and helped shape our history. Their contributions through the generations to art and music and literature, to science, scholarship, and exploration are extraordinary. The spirit and creativity that shines through Hispanic heritage is woven into the very fabric of our great nation. Our amazing Hispanic American communities embody our great American values of faith and family and security and hard work and freedom. Their commitment to those values is why countless citizens of Hispanic descent have served in uniform to defend our country, our citizens, and our flag. 60 Hispanic Americans have been awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for their outstanding bravery in battle. Did you know that? 60. That's a lot. That's a lot. It's a great, great Medal of Honor. Did you say we have? Oh, wow, that's so fantastic. Do you mind if I go up and shake hands? I'll interrupt our speech. I want to shake hands with somebody. I heard you were here. I'm glad I got to meet you. I heard you were here. The Medal of Honor, that's the big deal, right? That's the big deal. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you. Today, we're grateful to have more than 250,000 Hispanic Americans serving in our military. We salute all of those who defend our nation and who defend our way of life. Each of you here today represents a vital part of the fabric of this nation and the nation that I love and that you love. You teach our children, you lead our churches, you protect our communities, and you defend our nation. Among you are leaders in government, faith, and business. Fantastic people in this audience. I know some of them. And believe me, they're very tough and they're very smart. Sometimes they're too tough, but that's okay. I have to deal with it. I have to deal with it. Fantastic people. In fact, today, Hispanic American-owned small businesses are growing at a tremendous rate, especially among our Latinas. Raise your hands. Go ahead. It's tough to compete with, I will tell you. Who are leading the way in starting new businesses. You're leading the way. You're leading the way. You guys better get going. And once we pass our historic tax reform plan, and we are having not only reform, we're having the largest tax cuts in the history of our country. The history of our country. Does anybody in this room mind getting a massive tax cut? Does anybody? Does anybody object to paying less taxes? I don't see any hands. Okay. But Hispanic American businesses and families will prosper like never before. This tax cut and tax reform is going very well, and it's going to be a tremendous boost for our country, including the fact that we're the highest taxed nation in the world, and we will go from that to being down on the lower rung of taxes. So we'll be paying far, far less. So that's very important for keeping our businesses and our jobs. We're working every day to secure a future of peace, prosperity, and sovereignty for every American citizen. And we hope for a future of freedom and prosperity throughout the entire Western Hemisphere. That's why, under my administration, we have taken decisive action to stand with the good people of Cuba and Venezuela. Great people. Great, great people. As I announced before a wonderful crowd in Little Havana earlier this year, we will not lift sanctions on the Cuban regime until it delivers full political freedom for the Cuban people. The same failed communist ideology that has brought oppression to Cuba has brought nothing but suffering and misery everywhere and every place it has been anywhere in the world. Communism is the past. Freedom is the future. We also stand with the people of Venezuela who are suffering under the ruthless socialism of the Maduro regime. We reject socialist oppression, and we call for the restoration of democracy and freedom for the citizens of Venezuela. Many Hispanic Americans understand very personally why it is so important for us to defend our nation. God-given freedom. We want God-given. It's God-given freedom. And uphold the rule of law. Our commitment to these values has been the source of America's prosperity, the foundation of our security. And these values has made us a beacon, an absolute beacon to the nations of the world. As we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, we're grateful for all of you who have contributed to our communities and for your continued leadership in America. With your help, we will strengthen our country's great foundations of faith and family and freedom, and we will build together one great American future. It's a tremendous honor to have you all at the White House. I want to thank you. I want to God bless you. God bless the United States of America. God bless the United States of America. And with that, I'd like to welcome a very special person who is doing a tremendous job as our Secretary of Labor, Secretary Acosta. Alex, keep it up. Keep it up, Alex. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you. It's wonderful to be here in the White House celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month with you, with the First Lady, and with so many friends, colleagues, and guests. Growing up in Miami as a son of Cuban immigrants, I saw firsthand the opportunities that this nation offers. Though my parents did not attend college, they worked hard. They worked incredibly hard to give me all those things they did not have. And that's why I'm here today. And that is also a testament.
We have been watching Hispanic Heritage Month, the event that the president is hosting along with the First Lady. You see them now on either side of the Labor Secretary, Alex Acosta, whom the president just turned the microphone over to. And we're going to pull away from this, but continue to monitor it as well. But just bring you up to speed on some of the things that the president has talked about. He was there for quite a few minutes, talking in a wide-ranging way about the contributions of people in America who are of Latin and Hispanic heritage. And he talked specifically about helping out Puerto Rico and wanted them to know this far away back on the mainland that they are still being thought of, and he's going to keep his promise to help them out at every turn. He talked about Hispanic small businesses and the numbers of them that are growing, particularly among women in the Hispanic community. And he jokingly looked out at the men in the audience and said, guys, you better catch up. But this one last important thing, he talked about the legislation to stand with the good people of Cuba and Venezuela. He said that we will not lift sanctions until the governments, the communist and socialist governments of those countries, respectively, do what's right by their people. He called Cuba a failed communism regime that has brought about so much suffering. He called Cuba Venezuela, ruthless socialist nation of Maduro regime. So that's some of what's been going on at a live event. At one point, the president did recognize one of the 60 Hispanic recipients of the Medal of Honor. So we'll move on now, but wanted to bring you a taste just to revisit what the president has been doing for about the last 20 minutes or so in the East Room at the White House. And now this. They will not be forgotten. The coroner in Las Vegas has released the names of all 58 victims of Sunday's horrendous events in Las Vegas. Their lives cut short, as you know, by a madman. This is we are learning of the more selfless acts of heroism among the gunfire. I'm Harris Faulkner. Let's go outnumbered overtime now. A 20-year-old aspiring nurse who fell into her high school sweetheart's arms. A Navy veteran haunted by the memories of war. A mechanic who loved the outdoors and held a stranger's hand as he passed away. Just some of the nearly 60 killed in the worst mass shooting in our nation's modern history. But the carnage may have been worse, if not for the quick thinking of ordinary citizens like the one we are about to show you, who ran into the line of fire to save the wounded.
We'll go get a few more. What do you got so far? We get someone in here. We get someone in here. What do you got, bud? Officer, I'm medic if you need help. Do you need help? Yes or no? Let's go. Do we have any other wounded people you take? Not right now. Go. Shoot, just go. Okay, let's go. You turn it out. You turn it out. Let's go.
6 or 7 people were told, alive today, if not for that one Good Samaritan. Scenes like that have played out throughout the night. Of course, we know now about Sunday's selfless acts of courage on display. Dan Springer joins us live from Las Vegas. Boy, I tell you, these are Americans putting our spirit into action. Can't get enough of hearing about how many lives they saved.
Yeah, that is so true, Harris. You know, we are more than 4 full days into this investigation, and the number 2, the deputy director at the FBI, has said that they still do not have an obvious motive, no clear thumbprint, which is very frustrating to a lot of people. But it is entirely possible that this killer, Stephen Paddock, simply wanted to go down in infamy for a horrendous act of evil. It is increasingly clear that he just wanted to kill as many people as possible. We've been reporting on his booking rooms in Chicago and Boston, most likely in an effort to create the same type of carnage. And now there's a report he tried to buy tracer ammunition at a Phoenix gun show. This was just a couple of weeks ago, but the dealer was sold out. Now, a tracer could have been even more accurate and more deadly, as it would have shown the killer where those bullets were landing. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, we're hearing more stories of heroism.
Get down right there.
Las Vegas city worker Raymond Page shot this video Sunday night as he drove his pickup truck toward the gunfire. He was able to pull several victims out and get them to hospitals. Police, meantime, are speculating that Stephen Paddock may have been planning a car bombing after the shooting rampage. They found 50 pounds of an explosive called tannerite, along with 1,600 rounds of ammunition in his car parked at the Mandalay Bay. We're now seeing the first public tributes to the victims. Last night, thousands showed up for a candlelight vigil for Charleston Hartfield. He was the off-duty Las Vegas police officer who was at the concert and killed trying to get people to safety. And a moving memorial at the iconic Welcome to Las Vegas sign, 58 white crosses, each with the name of a victim. Support for those victims continues. A GoFundMe page set up by county officials is up to $9.6 million, 75,000 donations. The goal is $15 million. Meanwhile, here at the Mandalay Bay, you can see that the windows where Stephen Paddock shot all those people out from, they have been repaired. Just minutes ago, we found out that they have fixed those windows as this city tries to get back to some type of normalcy. The memorials and the tributes will continue this weekend and next week. Harris?
Wow, it is chilling, so moving to see them move ahead and those windows be back into place. Dan Springer, thank you. The White House and some GOP lawmakers say they are open to talking about a ban on bump stocks. Those are the devices which cause a semi-automatic weapon to fire more rapidly and were used by the Las Vegas killer. And the National Rifle Association says it supports a federal review of those bump devices, but it is not calling for them to be outlawed. Here's NRA Chief Wayne LaPierre.
The Obama administration a couple years ago approves this device called a bump stock. If you take a look at it, I mean, any look at it, it takes a semi-automatic firearm and it makes it perform like a fully automatic firearm. It makes it function like one. And what the NRA has said is we ought to take a look at that, see if it's in compliance with federal law, and it's worthy of additional regulation. That being said, we didn't say ban, we didn't say confiscate.
Meanwhile, top House Democrat Nancy Pelosi says she hopes a ban on bump stocks will be a slippery slope leading to more gun control. Let's bring in Newt Gingrich, former House Speaker and a Fox News contributor. He's the author of the new book, Vengeance, which is out next Tuesday. Speaker, it's always good to see you. You know, it was interesting, and I don't know how much more the mainstream media outside of us has been covering it, but a point of fact that the NRA now is stepping in and saying, let's review what was put into place under the Obama era.
Well, look, let me say, first of all, this is my first time being on your new show, and I want you to know how thrilled I am and the entire team at Gingrich Productions is that you have a show. We've always admired you on Outnumbered, and I think you're going to do a wonderful job. So I'm thrilled to be with you.
Thank you, Speaker.
I think it's very important. Look, I am for the right to bear arms. In fact, in my course on defending America, I have an entire section on the Second Amendment and why it matters. But this is something. In 1934, the Federal Firearms Act said that you could not have an automatic weapon. You can't have a machine gun, except under very strict licensing, and we've been very tough about that because it's so obviously extraordinarily dangerous. This has the effect of creating a machine gun-like capability, turning a semi-automatic weapon where you have to pull the trigger every time into what is in effect an automatic weapon. I suspect when we look at it carefully, we're going to decide that this should be covered under the 1934 Firearms Act and require very stringent federal controls in order to have one of these things. They are clearly killing machines, and they don't relate to the right to bear arms in a traditional sense. I was very glad to see the National Rifle Association come out and say we ought to look at this, take a serious review of it, and certainly the terrible killings that we've just seen in Las Vegas have got all of us thinking we have to take a serious look at this.
You know, Speaker, I always like to look for those spots where we can figure out not who's right, but what's right. And how significant do you think it is at this point? Because from where I sit, it is certainly different. That the NRA then steps in where many Democrats haven't even stepped in and said, let's meet someplace in the middle. And still, you know, they have a membership that they have to honor the rights of, too.
Well, look, I do think that there's a very deep sense that the Second Amendment was put in deliberately by the Founding Fathers to protect us from government. I mean, there's no question the Second Amendment was designed as a political amendment to make sure that the American people were armed. And there are about 300 million weapons in the United States. It's an amazing ability to defend ourselves. But at the same time, I think it saddened me a little bit to see Nancy Pelosi promptly go back to the same old tired script. Here's a place where she could calmly come to the middle, join the National Rifle Association in a serious effort, and I like the way you put it. Let's look for the right thing to do. And I think most Americans would agree that we do not want to have an ability for somebody to easily turn a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon, in effect a submachine gun. And I think that probably there will be strong support for adding this to the 1934 Firearms Act. We have, after all, for over 80 years, had a federal law which said you can't own a machine gun except under very unique licensed circumstances. I think this clearly fits under that general rule.
Speaker, before I let you go, because in the interest of actually getting something done, do you think words like that slippery slope keep us from getting to where we need to be? I mean, you have led the House on the Hill. You know that the prickliness, if you will, of politics. But at some point, we do have to get together and talk about these issues.
Right. And it'd be nice occasionally, particularly for a very senior leader like former Speaker Pelosi, be nice to occasionally tone down the words, try to come together, and let's have a civil conversation without automatically becoming partisan. And here's a place where we might actually get something positive done for the country. All
right. Speaker Newt Gingrich, thank you, sir, for your kind words and for your expertise on this matter as well. We appreciate it. Well, today, President Trump doing what Republicans in Congress have not been able to do by striking a blow to Obamacare in the workplace. We'll talk about it. Stay close. Let's start with this Fox News alert. The White House is rolling back part of Obamacare. That is happening today. The provision, which requires companies to include birth control with their employee health insurance, is what we're talking about. That rule previously had exemptions for churches and religious nonprofits. Now nearly any business can opt out, effective immediately. The ACLU responded with a lawsuit. Kristen Fisher is live at the White House. Kristen, on what grounds could these businesses now object?
Well, before these exemptions were limited to include religious beliefs, but now they've been expanded to include moral objections as well. So according to the rule released today, employers can withhold contraception coverage if they have, and this is the exact quote, sincerely held moral objections. A spokeswoman for the Department of Health and Human Services says, quote, no American should be forced to violate his or her own conscience in order to abide by the laws and regulations governing our healthcare system. Today's actions affirm the Trump administration's commitment to upholding the freedoms afforded all Americans under our Constitution. So as for how these companies can claim that they have, quote unquote, sincerely held moral objections, well, the administration says that that'll be determined by the state in which the company is located. So the bottom line, if an employer's position is determined to be sincerely held, whatever that means, then that company, nonprofit, basically any non-governmental entity or employer, that company, nonprofit, whatever, they could withhold birth control coverage from their employees under this new rule released just today, Harris.
All right, we're going to get deeper into this with our power panel coming up. We appreciate you setting up the facts for us, Kristen Fisher. Thank you very much. Well, a cryptic message to the world from President Trump as he was meeting with top military leaders at the White House. Did you see it? It was during a photo op before a dinner with Pentagon brass and their spouses. He told reporters at that meeting, quote, the calm before the storm is what it was, with tensions rising around the world. His comment suggesting something major could be in the works. Well, you watch for yourself.
You guys know what this represents? Well, it's the calm before the storm.
What's the storm?
Could be the calm before the storm.
What storm is
We have the world's great military people in this room. I will tell you that. And we're going to have a great evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
We need a general. General Jack Keane is here, retired four-star general, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, and a Fox News military analyst. Cue the general, in fact. Do we have a storm, and when would it hit?
Well, first of all, Harris, congratulations. It's so
General,
great.
thank you.
I'm absolutely thrilled to see you in this position here. It's just wonderful. So well deserved.
Oh, that means so much. Thank you very much.
Well, the storm. The world out there is stormy. That is for sure. What this president has done, Harris, he has put America back on the world stage as a global leader. He's reassuring our allies, and something that Barack Obama was quite unwilling to do, he is confronting our adversaries. And I think we have an announcement coming. All the press is speculating it's certainly surrounding Iran. He's going to take Iran on clearly as a strategic enemy of the United States. They're trampling over all of our goals in the Middle East, the goals of our allies. He said as much back in Riyadh to the head of state of 55 countries. And he certainly doesn't like the nuclear deal, but he even likes their behavior even less.
You know, it's interesting what you say. There was an air of capitulation that we were kind of flavored with over the last few years per the critics of the Obama administration. And I'm wondering how you right the ship with that, if President Trump has now done that in your estimate, and how significant that is.
Well, it started on January the 30th, 10 days after the inauguration, when Iran test-fired a ballistic missile. I think it was designed to get what kind of reaction out of the new president. He sanctioned them, and he called them out and said, I am not going to tolerate your aggressive behavior in destabilizing the region. This is more than just ballistic missile testing. And what he said in Riyadh was actually historical. And now we know that he's been conducting a review of Iran and its aggressive behavior in the region and nuclear deal for months now. And I think he's at a point where he's made a decision.
So, General, what about that deal that we know would actually be the reason why you decertify? What have they done specifically where you could say, okay, let me check that box, let me check that box?
You know, they've made some minor non-compliance things, and then when they get back into compliance, they get credit for the compliance. I think the president's approach with his national security team, if they decertify, will be that they violate the spirit of the deal. And what do I mean by that? One is you're conducting ballistic missile testing, though not prohibited by the deal, is prohibited by the UN resolution. And why would you want to be testing ballistic missiles?
And it's threatening in its message.
If you're not going to put nuclear weapons on them. You know, the second thing that disturbs them so much is certainly the fact that they're trampling over our allies in the region. They're in Lebanon, they're in Syria, they're influencing Iraq, they destabilized Yemen. Those are very serious issues, and that's the IRGC that's doing that, and the Quds Force and supporting them in those efforts. Those are serious issues for United States stability and security in the region, and that's why he looks at this thing and he said, well, we got this deal with the Iranians. It's very narrow in focus. We don't even like the content of it, but at the same time, Iran is taking the money from the deal and using it to put the security of our allies and our national interest at risk.
Wow. Well, if there is a storm coming, it might be via Iran. If we decertify, that's going to certainly feel like a storm from what you're saying. But you've enumerated the reasons why we might see it happen, General. Thank you so very much for breaking it down and setting us straight on it. Always appreciate it. A new call now for a change in House Democratic leadership. As one of the top Democrats says, it's time for Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and her two top lieutenants to step aside, make room for the new generation. We racked up the news. Now we'll get into the power panel to talk about it. Is she right? Wow, what are Democrats going to do with her?
I think there comes a time when you need to pass that torch, and I think it's time.
Oh, this is interesting inside the Democratic Party. I wonder what the dinner parties are like right now. A top House Democrat is calling for House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and her two top lieutenants to step aside and make room for the next generation of leaders. Pelosi's team is slamming that request, saying she's kept the caucus unified against major Republican legislation, including a bill to repeal Obamacare. But here's what Vice Democratic Caucus Chairwoman Linda Sanchez said earlier.
Do you think it's time to pass the torch to a new generation of leaders? And I want to be a part of that transition. I want to see that happen. I think that we have too many really great members here that, don't always get the opportunities that they should. And, I would like to see that change.
Simon Rosenberg is a former campaign advisor to Bill Clinton and president and founder of the think tank NDN. Simon, it's always good to have you here. You know what? I think you forecast this a little bit ago, because you and I were talking about change and what that was going to look like. Is this what you anticipated?
So first of all, congratulations on the new show. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Simon.
And good luck with it. Listen, 2 quick points. One is, I think it was inappropriate for Linda Sanchez to have raised this right now. I mean, there are periods when we have these debates. It's every 2 years when the leadership elections come along. Having said that, right, point 2 is that this generational challenge that she articulated is going to be a challenge for Nancy Pelosi to keep her team together. I mean, just like the Republicans, anyone who runs one of these caucuses knows that keeping your team together is hard, right? McConnell's had issues, Ryan's had issues. One of Nancy's greatest challenges, there are a lot of young, ambitious Democrats that want to get more airtime, want to move up in the leadership ladder. And so how she manages this going forward will be, I think, a really important part of whether she's a successful leader in the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's interesting. You always look for those opening salvos for somebody to fundraise off of within politics. Yeah. And nobody gets hurt by this, I guess, except for if you're Nancy Pelosi and your top lieutenants. But does this give the door to open for the GOP to say, look, fresh ideas? Even the Democrats agree they don't have any.
I don't think so. I mean, I think that, there's so much else going on in politics right now, right? And so many issues, and there's such big debates. But I do think that, look, this is a hard business. I mean, Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan have both had real struggles, right? Keeping, the ACA was a big setback for Mitch McConnell, and Paul Ryan's had challenges with the Freedom Caucus. This is hard. I mean, keeping your team together in this business is really hard. Yeah.
Let's replace the two of them and the people who work for them. And oh, by the way, here are a bunch of suggestions that we have for you in the middle of big times. Like we're coming off the heels of Vegas. This is not happening in a vacuum right now.
Yeah, and I do think that, listen, the Democratic Party, its voters are very young, right? Our voters are much younger than Republican voters.
That would not be Nancy Pelosi, with all respect.
No, and so I think that part of what we're talking about here and why this is such an issue is that not only are there many young politicians that want to move up, up the greasy pole, right, in Washington. But we also have many of them slide down. That's why they call it that, right?
Oh, the swamp has a greasy pole.
Yeah, and so, but also because we have so many young voters that are looking for politicians their age who are more fitting to them. And so I think this generational challenge inside the Democratic Party is a real one. And there is a lot of energy towards letting the generational wheel turn, which is part of what Linda was talking about. I still think it was a mistake. I think Nancy's going to remain leader as long as she wants to.
You do? You don't think she's going to leave?
I think Nancy Pelosi is going to remain leader as long as she wants to be there. Absolutely.
She calls herself a master legislator. We'll see about that.
Listen, she's a remarkable person. I've enjoyed working with her for a very long time, and she keeps the admiration of so many of her colleagues, and I think, but again,
do you need change though? Do you need it?
We'll see. We'll see.
Oh, a political answer there at the end. Simon Rosenberg, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Sure.
Wow,
Take
Nancy
care,
Pelosi. Whew. President Trump is dealing a major blow to one of the most controversial aspects of Obamacare, the contraceptive mandate. And according to one member of our panel that's coming up, the power panel, it's nothing but an intentional distraction on the part of the White House. Is that true, or is this keeping with legislation, as I would argue, that was already in place? We'll talk about it. Well, this was breaking news earlier. It's developing on this Friday. The Trump administration rolling back a key portion of Obamacare, requiring companies to provide birth control coverage as part of employee health insurance. Let's bring in our panel, Jason Chaffetz, former Utah congressman and a Fox News contributor now, and Zach Pecanis, founder, president, and CEO of Pecanis Strategies, a former Hillary Clinton campaign staffer and former DNC advisor. We had a picture of Nancy Pelosi up before. You said, oh, yeah, she'll stay. Dude, I don't know what it's like at your Christmas parties this year. But we'll see what happens.
She's a very strong leader, and we're thrilled she's leading the.
And Jason, you said
keep her there as long as possible. Don't go anywhere. Stay, Nancy, stay.
Republicans rejoicing over the fact that there's no change coming within your party. All right, we'll move on. Let's talk about Obamacare and where we are with this. Jason, you want to take this first on. This is not a new exemption. This came with the package that was put into place while President Obama was still president. But it looks at now doing what?
Well, look, I think there needs to be a recognition that some people have a religious objection to providing certain health care products to their employees. That doesn't mean that employees can't go get them, but to force a company to spend their money to provide these products is offensive to some people. And I think we should err on the side of protecting people's religious liberties and understand that it's offensive to some people. And what Trump is doing is making it more palatable for those that truly have a religious conviction that they want to express.
So I said this last hour on Outnumbered. So it's not new. It just didn't happen until now.
Right.
So this president has decided, you know what? We are going to do what this legislation says.
Look, here's the problem. Before the 2012, 1/3 of women were having trouble paying for their birth control. And the problem is that birth control is not just about pregnancy. In fact, 58% of birth control users use it because of the other health benefits that it has. It lowers risks for cancer,
You should talk to
example.
Jason, because I know all about how the body works.
Yeah, well,
Jason,
you guys should face each other. I'm like,
the whole promise of Obamacare, as sold by Barack Obama, was President Obama. It was going to save $2,500 per person. You could keep your doctor. All these things that turned out to be true. So when it does cost more than $2,500, and we're talking about a very small sum of money, again, a religious conviction, that's in large part how our country was founded.
But what you're missing is that this actually saves money. In the first year that this was enacted, it saved $1.8 billion of people spending money for birth control. Again, 58%
You're
of
trying
people.
to force somebody to spend money on something they have a religious conviction against. And as Harris pointed out, it's already in the legislation. It's just now finally being invoked.
But here's the thing. If
and
you
I didn't write the
actually-
legislation. I voted against the legislation. So
yeah, so that's a good point, Zach. Actually, so what would Democrats want to have happen now? You can't what are you going to do? Because if you want to talk about changing Obamacare, I think that the Republicans will listen.
Yes.
Well, if this
you want to repeal it, I'll join you.
I mean, we are actually talking about a change that President Trump is doing, and so he is making a change the way things are currently working. And the way things have been currently working is ensuring that all women have access to this birth control, which they need. That's not just for pregnancy, that is actually for health benefits like lowering the risk of cancer. And if you're interested in terms of the effects in terms of pregnancy, we are talking about the lowest levels of unintended pregnancies in the history of the United States, as well as the lowest number of abortions since they became legal in 1973. That is in large part because of this mandate.
The fundamental problem is...
Well, that's an interesting point.
We don't want Washington, D.C. to be dictating to women what they should and should not do and what they have to pay for.
It's not
we want
dictating.
them, but it is. You're forcing an employer to have to pay for it. And all it's saying is...
That's not forcing women.
One of the problems with the Affordable Health Care Act, A, it's not affordable, but B, is there were hundreds of times in the piece of legislation that gave great latitude to the Secretary of Health and Human Services to make these kinds of decisions.
All right, we're going to move on.
That's the problem.
Because we want to talk about more. We're going to have our power panel stay right here to talk about the proposed ban on bump stocks and what they had to do in Vegas with the guns that the killer used. Stay close.